Have you ever thought of reading great literature or big books, but you have been truly afraid of how long the book is? It's not even about the actual book or the story that it might not interest you, but it is about the actual length of the book. Or have you ever thought of reading a book from a different nation in a different language, which is obviously translated into your language, the one you can read, but still you have that fear of the length of the book? That thick ass book scares you because it is too long to actually pick it up actively and read every single day and finish it in like a couple of months. It is scary, yes. So in this episode, we are going to talk about exactly that. How to read big books, read Russian literature. Hello, this is Karthik and we are back again with yet another episode of Growing Up Gone Wrong. To begin with, I would love to say that I adore Russian literature. I am a true fan of it. I still have a long way to go before I can call myself an enthusiast, but I can still say that I'm a keen observer and a keen reader when it comes to literature, and especially Russian. And when we talk about Russian literature, the first thing that comes to mind is Tolstoy. That is what comes into your mind. Chekhov comes into your mind, and that is a good sign. Like, you already know how Russian literature is associated with such great authors. But at the same time, most of us know how big War and Peace is. We know how long and exhausting Anna Karenina is, and how exhausting it is also to read Crime and Punishment, The Idiot. Every single one of these books, at least on an average, are like 800 plus pages, which is insane. Plus it is. So how do we begin? Like, how do we start to adapt ourselves with Russian literature and in the end towards our ultimate goal of reading big books? The first and foremost that we need to do, the best thing that we can do, is start with short stories. And it does not even limit itself to Russian literature. In any piece of literature, English, whether it be French or any single thing, any kind of book, big book that you want to read and it is a classic or any single thing, you can always begin small, and you can always talk about, or maybe poetries and plays and short stories, as I already mentioned. These can get going with customs that that author or that the kind of literature might get you into. For Russian, you might start with Anton Chekhov. Chekhov is a saint. He was a kind of guy who had the worst upbringing ever. Like, he had a small family and they were poor, and he always had to work hard to achieve things. He was given a small stable room to live in, but he used to work hard and he used to write and he used to do every single thing with so much passion, and it always shows in its work. Like, in every single work of his, we can obviously see the truthfulness, the cleverness, the quaintness, but at the same time, we can also see how kind of a soul he is. So those are the kind of stories that you can start with. Like, you can start with Seduction. It is a very clever play by Anton Chekhov. I personally had the chance to view that play live and act in Delhi once. So it was a very great experience, masterful play written by Chekhov. The best thing you can do is that you can start with plays. You can start with Anton Chekhov. You can start with Uncle Vanya. It is a play, Uncle Vanya. The thing about Chekhov is he has some truthfulness to him. Like, all of his works has truthfulness in it, and it is way too hyper real. Like, it always comes with a metaphor, and you always have to look for the hidden deep meanings behind it. At the same time, you can feel the pain, the anguish very subtly in his plays and short stories, which is a really great way to start with Russian literature, and it gives you a real touch of what you are actually going into when you actually start picking up the big books. Oh, and the very important aspect of picking a book or picking an author is the translations. When it comes to reading books from different nations and different languages, translations, a lot of you might think that translations do not really matter much, because in the end you are just reading the same work, the same thing written by an original author in a different language. What difference does it make? Like, which translation do we pick? So the thing is, translations have a voice of their own. How many times have we noticed, like, the phrase or a specific story that we narrate in Hindi or our native languages, which are quite a lot in India? It is totally different, and it holds some different meaning to the listener as well. It grasps the listener's attention in a totally different way. If we talk about it in English, it kind of sounds a little funny. So that is how it is with translations as well. Like, I used to start reading, when I started reading Russian literature, I started with Constance Garnett. Like, she translated most of the works of Russian literature in the earlier part of the 19th century. Not the earlier, but in the 19th century. And a lot of her translations were really good. It grew into the market real quickly. But at one point, when she started translating a lot of different Russian books, like she translated a few of the works by Tolstoy, and she also translated a few of the works by Dostoevsky and Chekhov. So when a person was reading Chekhov or Dostoevsky, the reader did not really get any difference in voice and writing structure than maybe, let's say, Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. Every single one of those sounded the same, even though they are quite different. Her voice remained the same throughout. Dostoevsky started sounding like Tolstoy. Tolstoy started sounding like Chekhov, and it just did not really have that native touch that the Russian literature brings to the world of books. So that is why it is really important to pick the best possible translation that you can have, which I personally recommend is Pavir and Volkonsky. Richard Pavir and Volkonsky are a very magnificent couple, and they have translated over all of the editions of Russian classics. And they somehow managed to get that specific tone of a specific author in the Russian. So it is crazy how translations play an important role in reading books, because when you pick a big book, you need the book to talk to you in a way that the author wanted it to, not how it would have sounded in your head, or not how a translator would translate it to you without any real emotions. Sometimes you need that extra touch you get from the author. You need to connect with the author a little more to actually get more out of the book. So I believe translations are very important to select. Then when we start with the big guns like Anna Karenina or War and Peace by Tolstoy, I mean, Tolstoy is God when you come to Russian literature, and you have to at some point get your hands dirty with Tolstoy. That sounded wrong, but you need to get your hands dirty with those kind of books, like those big books, because they have so much to offer. Over a span of like 900 pages, you grow and live with the book. And once again, I suggest Pavir and Volkonsky's translations for Dostoevsky and Tolstoy as well. And a lot of people think that these kind of books, these big guns, are not readable. It is not practical for a common man who does not really have a lot of time in his hand in a day to read such books. But it's totally untrue. To read big books is like to be a character in that book. It's like when you befriend a character and you slowly start becoming a character, and the story starts revolving around you. At the core of reading big books lie a very general principle. You need to go chapter by chapter. You don't need to consider the book as a whole. You need to consider it as tiny bits of chunks that you can read every single day. And I think these kind of books do not really have long chapters. It is just like 1 or 2 pages, and there are quite tons of chapters, but these are not really long. You can read 1 chapter a day, 10 chapters a day, and you will be good. But the only thing that I would not recommend you to do is speed reading. Do not speed read these books, because you need to get this off your checklist, or maybe your TBR. It has been lying around in your Goodreads section for a quite long time, and you wanted to just check that off the list. That is not the way you approach big books. There are certain big books that you can actually approach those books, but in the end, when it comes to great literature and big books, you need to really get into the groove. You need to give it time. You need to live with the book. And it really gets to you, the books, As if in a relationship, it is not just one-sided thing, and it does not develop. It does not develop in like a month or so. It takes time. It takes years maybe. So, because I can tell you from my personal experience, I read Anna Karenina in 7 months, and that was the best I could have done with this book. Because had I read it like in a month or so, I would not really have grown with the characters. Because when I first started the book, Levin was a totally different person, and I was a totally different person. Levin is a character in Anna Karenina, which I personally adore. If you ever read Anna Karenina, I would love to discuss that with you. And so when I was reading Anna Karenina, I grew along with that book. When I started that book, I was a little skeptic about the idea of reading big books and how that could affect you for a long run. But when I completed that book, I was a totally changed person. Like it almost felt like I had seen a live person grow in front of me, or a live plant grow in front of me. For example, last month I was traveling and I stayed in a village in Himachal Pradesh in the mountains for a month, and I saw a plant grow, not a plant, a tree grow into an autumnal kind of figure, because a month ago it was totally green, it was flourishing, but I saw it diminish itself into red leaves and ultimately leafless. And that was insane, because if you read, or if it is just exactly like that, if you read the book in a month, you might not be able to see that book in all seasons of your life. You might not be able to retain it in a better way, and you might really not know the real aspect of that book. It is a really good comparison between that tree and this book, but I really finally caught how it is very important to take it slow. Let's come to another practical tip when it is about reading big books. You can always have an audiobook to yourself. I would personally recommend you to just get an audiobook of the big book you are reading and read along and listen at the same time. I know that sounds crazy, like a lot of those ADHD kids would be like, what the fuck, dude? Exactly. But in the end, I'm telling you, this is going to really benefit you, because it also syncs up your reading and listening skills. The best thing you can do is download the audiobook of Anna Karenina, maybe let's just say, and put it on 1.5 speed and listen to it. And at the same time, when you're getting in the groove, you just start reading at the same time. You just follow the same translation in the audiobook, you start following the same translation on your physical copy, and you start reading along. Whenever you want to write something, pause the video, pause the audio, and just note it down, and maybe just carry along for a few chapters. And let's just say you carry on with this thing for 100 pages. Yes, your progress would be slow, but it would be totally raw, and you would be really persevering with it, and you would retain it in a much better fashion and for longer. And yeah, a lot of us still feel that way. Like audiobooks are like alien technology. If we belong to the traditional world of paperbacks. Like I personally still haven't gotten used to Kindle. It really feels like an alien technology, even though I myself as a software engineer, like I work hand in hand with the technology. But still, it does not really feel that you are reading a book until you are holding a book in your hand, right? But in the end, the main goal of us, of all of us, is actually to retain and read and be familiar with great literature more often. It does not matter in what form or through what medium that we actually get that knowledge, but it is important that we actually do get that. So these were like the major tips that I personally follow while I'm reading these kind of books, big books, Russian literature, let's just say Crime and Punishment, Anna Karenina, War and Peace. That is what I try to do with reading. So I would like to summarize all of this for you quickly. First and foremost thing is you can start reading short stories, plays, poetries maybe. In that way, when you're not actually making a lot of progress with the long book, like you're reading 10 pages a day and there are like 1,000 pages, you can really get demotivated, like you are not making any progress, but you are. But psychologically, you do need that bump to know that you're actually making progress. So reading short stories and plays that you can easily tick off your to be read list, and that can really boost your ego. Like, yeah, you are actively making progress in your list as well, and at the same time you are consuming great literature and you are truly realizing the essence of it. So that can go hand in hand. Second, picking translations is like the most important thing that you could do before actually picking a book. Translations can mean or define your reading experience to a large extent. Then third is read chapter by chapter. Take it slow and just live with the book and do not try to speed read. And fourth, that I forgot to mention actually, is buddy reading. Join book clubs maybe. There are tons of book clubs. Like we are paying for subscriptions for Netflix and we are paying for a lot of other subscriptions, but we can also somehow pay for book clubs. Like I'm not talking about those book clubs that are started by fans and fellow podcasters. Like they're amazing too, I'm sure. But start those Like when we talk about gym, when we actively start paying for gym, we start actually taking it seriously, right? So when we start paying for book clubs and everything, we really get involved in it, like as if we are paying for a course. We actively participate, we actively read, and of course we get company, and a lot of other people are going through the same thing, and we all like collectively support each other through the course of the big book that we are reading. Let's say Anna Karenina. We are actively discussing about the characters, and we are growing along with it. So that is a really good point. So that was it from my side. Like I am personally collecting more and more such tips and tricks to get myself into reading a lot more as well. Like I haven't been reading a lot this year, but I would really try to read a lot more next year, or starting from today at least. So that was it from my side. And one last thing, like if you want me to start maybe a book club or anything, I would link a poll down below, and you can always let me know and contact me at @notkarthik on Instagram, or you can email me at contact.karthik@gmail.com, and I will love to connect with you and form a new book club for us where we can take all of these things quite seriously and get going with it. So, see you in the next episode.